Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Path of Awakening Buddhist Center course. We are now beginning to work our way through the book Shambhala, The Sacred Path of the Warrior, which is an editing of talks by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche on the teachings that relate to Shambhala. This is in preparation for entering the third volume of The Profound Treasury of the Ocean of Dharma, which is purely on the Vajrayana. Shambhala is kind of a secular version of the Vajrayana. At least that's the way Trungpa Rinpoche presented it. But as far as I'm concerned, it's it's really very, very Vajrayana, very tantric, and very beautiful. A few words about the whole idea of Shambhala and what it is. The idea was that it was a legendary kingdom, which may or may not ever have existed. There were, and it really may, because there were many, many, many kingdoms which rose and disappeared in Central Asia over the millennia before Christ, and then during the 1,000 years after him too. It's really extraordinary how many different kingdoms there were. And this one, the idea of Shambhala, is that the king of Shambhala, whose name was Dawa Sangpo perhaps, in Tibetan, means good moon, and Suchandra in Sanskrit, invited the Buddha to come and give teachings. Khenpo Namdrol dates that at around 688 BC, which is pretty early compared to other dates for the Buddha's life. But whatever, the normal idea is that he came and gave teachings to the king of Shambhala and his subjects just before he died, in about the last 3 years of his life, the Buddha's life. And the king said to him, look, we're lay people. I'm a king. These are my courtiers and my people, and we're not going to become monks and nuns. Can you give us a teaching that is suitable for lay? And the Buddha did. And the teaching he gave was the first tantric teaching. It was the teaching called the Wheel of Time Tantra. Tantras are very, very condensed and powerful texts. They need a lot of explanation. And the Kalachakra Tantra, the Wheel of Time Tantra, is certainly in that category. And this is the one that he gave to King Dawa Sangpo, and it was studied by the king and all of his courtiers, and everybody got enlightened eventually, is the idea. I'm going to give you a few quotes from some different sources having to do with Shambhala. It says, the idea is an enlightened society. It existed in Middle Asia, and it vanished, perhaps, into a more celestial realm, near the earth, but not on it. This is the myth, or not myth, who knows? The beings there are more advanced than us spiritually, and they can perform any miracle. Otherwise, they're no different than ordinary human beings. Though because of our ignorance, if beings of Shambhala were to appear on earth, we would be unable to see them. These are the words of a teacher named Khenpo Katar, who's connected with the Karmapa. Khenpo Namdrol Rinpoche says that Shambhala existed north of the river Sita. These are mythical geographies. It was in the middle of an 8-petaled lotus. This is a huge geographic formation. And in the very middle of that lotus was Mount Kailash. And in the center of that is the palace of Kalapa, which was the palace of the Dharma Rajas. These are the first kings of Shambhala, followed by the Rigdens. And this whole area was 12 yojanas wide, which is somewhere between 48 and 108 miles wide, this area of the palace and its center, in the center of this lotus. And around that were 10 million houses. Beyond them are snow-capped peaks. And each of the petals of the lotus had 12 great regions, each with 100 districts, governed by a human lord wearing a gold crown who is an emanation of a god or a serpent deity. And altogether, according to Khenpo Namdrol, there are 960 million towns in Shambhala, and so forth. Then there was a fellow who knew Trungpa Rinpoche in India when Rinpoche had just come out of Tibet. He was actually the Canadian ambassador to India. His name was James George. And he died actually just a couple of years ago, in February of 2020. He was Canada's High Commissioner to India and the ambassador to Nepal. And he witnessed and described Trungpa Rinpoche doing prasena. Prasena is an act by which you can tell the future. And you do it by looking into a mirror and seeing the future in the mirror. Trungpa Rinpoche was quite expert at prasena. And I never watched him do it, but I have friends, in fact, a wife who watched him do it. He said that when you have the talent, excuse me, getting a junk call here. And when you have the talent, you can actually, you don't even need a mirror, you can do it in your thumbnail. And James George described Trungpa Rinpoche performing prasena. And he said that Trungpa Rinpoche's prasena, he looked into his mirror and saw a circular range of high snow-capped mountains around a green valley in which was a beautiful city. And in the middle of that, a little palace on a hill of terraces. Around this hill were other enclosures with people living, temples and gardens, chotens, those are monuments to the Buddha, and other sacred objects. And James George said that Trungpa Rinpoche described it as if he were looking out the window. Here's a quote from Trungpa Rinpoche about Shambhala. "We can change the world, definitely. The problem is that we don't smile when chaos occurs to us. When chaos occurs, even within that chaos, we can smile, which cures confusion and resentment. Shambhala was an enlightened society that manifested non-aggression. Its geographic location was in the middle of Asia, in the middle or heart of the Orient. The Shambhala society was able to transmute aggression into love. Consequently, everybody in Shambhala attained enlightenment. So they no longer needed to domesticate their animals, and they no longer needed to fight wars. Finally, the whole society, the whole country, including all the buildings, ceased to exist on an earthly plane. That is the story of Shambhala." Someone asks a question of Trungpa Rinpoche. "Do you think that the kingdom of Shambhala will manifest again on a worldwide scale as a golden or enlightened age?" Trungpa Rinpoche, "You bet." I just love this. Question: 1 or 200 years from now? Trungpa Rinpoche, "Right now, it is possible." Question: Many lamas have said it may happen within 100 or 200 years. Trungpa Rinpoche, "That's speculation. It happens right now." So the first 7 kings of Shambhala, who reigned in about the first millennia before Christ, BC, were called Dharma Rajas. That means Dharma kings. And each remained on the throne for 100 years and propagated the study of the Kala Chakra Tantra. The first being Suchandra, as I mentioned before. And then here's Khenpo Namdrol. He says that it was in 881 BC that Shakyamuni Buddha gave the Kala Chakra initiation to the king at what is now the stupa of Amaravati in South India. Then Dawa Sangpo composed the commentarial treatise in 60,000 verses on the root Tantra in 360 days. He then taught it to his subjects and descendants and also built an enormous palace of Kala Chakra. Kala Chakra is the wheel of time. Then 6 more Dhamma Rajas ruled, each 100 years, the last ending his reign in 277 BC. Then began a succession of kings called the Kulika, which is another name for the Rigdens. Some of you are familiar with the term Rigden king. We are now in the rule, or the reign, of the 21st Rigden king, Kulika. who ascended the throne in 1927. All rule for 100 years, except the 10th, who ruled 182 years, and the 11th, who ruled for 221 years, and the 25th, who is not here yet, who will rule for 97 years. The first 7 lived after they ruled for 100 years, but they lived for 900 years each. The others lived between 200 and 800 years. There's more, but I'm just going to. The main thing is that we are now in a descent, according to the Shambhala teachings. The world is devolving into shorter lifespans for human being, more disease, more war. Look around. And this is what the Shambhala teachings have taught, that with beginning with the reign somewhere around the 20th Rigden, and we're now in the reign of the 21st, human history would start descending. And it will continue to do this until, hold on. It gets, the absolute worst is going to be the rule of the wrathful one of the wheel in 2327, and he will rule for 100 years, and then will come a great revolution. And in fact, Gesar of Ling, who's a great warrior, will come back to Earth, and in the rule of, I think it's the 24th Rigden, there will be a huge cataclysm, a war between the forces of good and the forces of evil. And the forces of good will prevail, and that will be followed by a period of 1,000 years of spiritual awakening and happiness and peace on earth. Sorry about the papers. So this is the myth, I'm giving it to you. But really what it was, the whole thing is about our state of mind and how we see the world. So we're going to look at the first 2 chapters of the book, Shambhala, The Path of the Warrior. Oh, by the way, I recommend on YouTube, if you go to YouTube and look for a video by a fellow named Ian Baker, like my last name, Baker, no relation. I happen to know Ian. Ian was an adventurer who went to India, and one thing led to another, and he began looking for Shambhala, looking for an entrance. There's a myth that says that there are earthly entrances to Shambhala, and there are supposed to be 4. And he wrote a book about this called The Heart of the World, but he has a terrific video about it, and it's called The Heart of the World on YouTube. I recommend it highly. I think you might really enjoy it. It has some amazing shots of videos of places that the world has rarely seen in Tibet, in and around Everest and other mountains. Yeah, there it is. Valerie put it in chat. Ian Baker, The Heart of the World on YouTube. And he also has a book. Okay. Trungpa Rinpoche was a tertan. That means, in the Nyingma tradition in particular, there are teachings which a teacher long ago may have had and knew that they were inappropriate for the people of his or her time, and so hid them, knowing that they would be discovered in the future. And by whom? The creator of these terma, these teachings, knew who would discover them and when, at a time when the people and the place were ready for these teachings. Trungpa Rinpoche was a great tertan. He found many terma, many of these hidden teachings. A tertan is a person who finds them. And I'm getting messages, I'm sorry. They distract me. Some of the terma that he got, a lot of them, were about Shambhala. And there are two kinds of terma. This is all very magical stuff. One are what are called earth terma, and these are actual physical objects. It might be a text, could be a statue, It could be hidden in the rafters of a house. It could be hidden in the bed of a river. It could be hidden in the middle of solid rock. And the terton, the finder of the terma, gets a hold of this, sometimes reaching into solid rock to pull it out. And the instant they touch it, the teachings that it contains flood into them, and they have to write them down. Because if it's a text, for instance, it's written in Dakini script. These are magical women who are carriers of the Dharma, and their script evaporates as it's read. And so the terton has to, as he reads it, he or she writes it down quickly. The other kind of terma are mind terma. Trungpa Rinpoche received both, but the Shambhala teachings he happened to receive as mind terma. And these came to him like radio transmissions. And he would ask for pen and paper, and he'd sit there and just do what looked like automatic writing and write out these texts. At the beginning of the Shambhala book, there is a page from one of these terma. It's called The Letter of the Black Ashe. And sometimes when you see Barry in the mornings and you see that black stroke behind him on the wall, that's the Black Ashe. And when you start reading this book, you'll get a text. On the left side is the Tibetan, and on the right side is the English translation that begins, "From the great cosmic mirror without beginning and without end, human society became manifest." And this is really a beautiful analogy, metaphor for these teachings, the whole thing that occurs here. And it's a very wonderful preliminary introduction. These texts, you can acquire them, but we would have to do Shambhala training levels. And the way this works is that this text, the Letter of the Black Ashe, from which the first page is printed in your book, Shambhala, the Sacred Path of the Warrior, that comes after you have completed the first 5 Shambhala training levels. You are then entitled to own and possess this text, and we study it together. So who knows, maybe we'll do that. And then there are many other texts that come as well, and they're quite beautiful. And when you read this, you can get a feeling for them. Now, so the idea of Shambhala represents the possibility right here and now that we could create Shambhala in our world, not necessarily as a physical manifestation, although that could be too, but certainly as a spiritual one. And it's the idea of secular enlightenment, not religious. And it is founded on the principles of sanity and the gentleness of the Buddhist tradition. It has its own independent basis, which is directly cultivating who and what we are as human beings, to encourage a wholesome existence for ourselves and others. During these oh so difficult times, COVID, war, overpopulation, loss of biodiversity, you name it, go watch the movie Legacy. It's really a stunner on Amazon Prime. And there are many legacies. Actually, there's several movies called Legacy. You want the one, I think it was done in 2020 or 2021 by a Frenchman. And it talks about we're in a descent right now. We're in a very difficult time. The population of the planet has quadrupled since 1918, doubled since 1970. There is a struggle for food, and the atmosphere, the ozone layer is in danger, global warming, all of it. Loss of biodiversity is immense, species just disappearing right off the planet. So we are in this time, and the world is in absolute turmoil, and the Shambhala teachings are founded on the premise that there is basic human wisdom that can help solve this world's problems. And this wisdom doesn't belong to any one culture or religion, nor does it come from the West or the East. It's embodied in Shambhala, which is a mythic kingdom, maybe real, maybe not, but it's certainly a symbol for these teachings. In fact, the prediction is that there's going to be a descent into chaos and suffering for some hundreds of years until the 24th century or 2400, somewhere around in there, and then a turnaround. A teacher I study with looked out at us and said, You're all going to be soldiers in the army of the Rigden king, fighting against the forces of chaos and evil in our future lives. So this is a tradition of human warriorship that has existed in many cultures and at many times throughout history. Now, by warriorship, we don't mean aggression, like what's happening now in Ukraine. Warriorship here it's a warrior. It's a translation of the word in Tibetan is pawo, which is the word that's translated warrior. And pawo literally means a brave person. So this is a tradition of bravery, of fearlessness, of being willing to confront and deal with all of the situations that the world gives us. It's not about making war on others. It's not about aggression. It's about fearlessness. And Trungpa Rinpoche felt that the North American Indian tradition, the Japanese samurai tradition, King Arthur and his knights in a semi-mythical rendition of it, all of these represented this fearless warrior tradition, warriors who represent the principles of goodness in life. He says the key to warriorship and the first principle of Shambhala vision, and this is key, is not being afraid of who you are. Not being afraid of it, not being ashamed of it, nothing. Is giving up self-hatred, is being willing to be just who we are, and that it's good, it's fundamentally okay, it's fundamentally workable, it's fundamentally a virtue. Ultimately, that is the definition of bravery, he says. Not being afraid of yourself. Shambhala teaches that in addressing the world's problems, we can be heroic and kind simultaneously. The opposite is selfishness. So it's not about building secure little walls and what's the word I want? Caves of selfishness. We must try to think about our little self-interest. Think about how we can help this world. And you can begin with your relatives and friends, the people around you. In fact, he says, you can begin with yourself. And this is so important. I've talked about this before in the teachings, that the ultimate evil is self-hatred, self-contempt, self-doubt. Trungpa Rinpoche once said, I've quoted this so many times, self-doubt is the Buddhist version of original sin. From it, elaborate all the other sins. These teachings are not about converting us to another theory. They're not about that at all. They're about discovering the wholesomeness that lives in us and in the world, and in taking delight in that and spreading it. He says, if we are willing to take an unbiased look, we will see that in spite of all our problems and confusion, all our emotional and psychological ups and downs, there is something basically good about our existence as human beings. Unless we discover the ground of goodness in our own lives, we cannot hope to improve the lives of others. If we are simply miserable and wretched human beings, how can we possibly imagine, let alone realize, enlightened society, which is what Shambhala is all about? So we discover real goodness in our lives by learning how to appreciate simple experiences, the basic goodness of being alive. Right now, we are sitting here with all our senses open: sight, sound, smell, taste, bodily sensations, tactile sensations, and mind, mental events. When we give up the anxiety of thought, when we come back into pure awareness, all of these sense perceptions are very vivid, colorful, rich, warm, meaningful. They have heart in them that we can feel in our hearts. They can inspire us with their beauty. And this is not just trees and rocks and frogs. This is people as well. So really what the path is about this Shambhala path, is about opening our minds to the beauty of this world, the extraordinary moving beauty of it as it arises in the present moment. And we begin to see how our thoughts about the past and the future, which are so full of anxiety and self-attack, dull out the world of art, the world of the appreciation of beauty in life, is this world of immediacy, here and now. And this is, he says, seeing a bright color, hearing a beautiful sound, feeling clean in and after the shower, a whiff of fresh air, the vividness of the phenomenal world which we so often ignore because we're lost in our depressed dreams. We don't see it. The real experience of goodness which happens to us all the time, but which we are too distracted to notice and ignore as mundane. This is really the challenge for us on the path, is to wake up from these anxious, fear-ridden dreams, which fill our minds from time to time, to the immediate, vivid awareness of this beautiful world as it arises now. He says, these moments when we awaken to this reveal basic non-aggression and freshness in our lives, basic goodness. This is the idea that this life, when we give up these aggressive, frightened, paranoid, anxious dreams, this world is fundamentally good, worth being here for. Every human being has a basic nature of goodness, which is undiluted and unconfused. That goodness contains tremendous gentleness and appreciation. This idea is the very heart of Shambhala. This is what makes Shambhala come alive. He says, as human beings, we can make love. We can stroke someone with a gentle touch. We can kiss someone with gentle understanding. We can appreciate beauty. We can appreciate the world, the vividness of color, sunshine, reality. Our sense perceptions can cheer us up, cure us of depression. If we recognize that the world we have is good, we can experience its goodness. So we're waking up from these dreams, these thought-filled dreams, from depressed thoughts. He says you might try to possess that goodness. The problem is wanting more and more. Like the people walking down Fifth Avenue, he says. He describes these people walking down Fifth Avenue wanting more and more. And he says, you might be willing to spend a lot of money to get it, but that's not going to do it. The basis of Shambhala is rediscovering that perfect and real sense of humor. It's a light touch. This isn't serious business. This is full of humor. That light touch of appreciation. And it begins with your ordinary, everyday situations. Really, it begins and ends there. The mundane, the way you comb your hair, wash your dishes, and so on. He says, we are basically awake. We are, fundamentally. It's what we come back to when we clear away the debris of thought, of these anxious dreams. Here we are. Awake is our fundamental being, our nature. It's not some tremendous achievement. We come back to it. We are basically awake and can understand reality and are not enslaved by our lives. We are free, which means having a body and mind and being able to uplift ourselves and relate to the world in the context of this wholesome awareness. The experiencing of basic goodness in our lives. We do it every time we come back to this. It's like you walk out and you see the beauty of the morning, and it hits you and it stops your mind for a second. So that's the experience of basic goodness, even if it's only a flash, and we can begin to extend that. That's what meditation is really about, is coming back to this open, clear awareness, which appreciates the beauty of the world. And it can make us feel that we are intelligent and decent people, and that the world is not a threat. We can see our shortcomings without feeling guilty or inadequate, he says, and at the same time, we can see our potential for extending goodness to others. We can help others into this too, and in doing that, we help ourselves. The essence of warriorship, being brave, fearless, or the essence of human bravery, is refusing to give up on anyone or anything. We can prevent disasters. It is up to us. We can save the world from destruction to begin with. That is Shambhala vision. But saving the world isn't enough. We have to work to build enlightened human society as well, which is the recreation of Shambhala. This isn't a utopian fantasy. It's up to each of us individually to find meaning of enlightened society. Okay. We plan to do chapter 2. I feel like that's enough. Chapter 1. What do you think, Michael? Barry, should we stop here or should we keep going into chapter 2? Discovering basic goodness.
I think there's a lot here already.
Yeah, why don't we see what comments and questions people have?
Okay, let's do that. We don't have to rush this, to say the least.
I'll chime in here. Chapters are so beautiful and so uplifting, inspirational. But as you were speaking just now, I just seeing the world in that way is, to me, reminds me of my early drug experiences of doing mushrooms or LSD and all of that. And as you're speaking, it just made me feel like there is a point to that. I see the trap of trying to get it over and over again. And I know in my own experience, having my mind blown into this new way of perceiving the world through a psychotropic drug, that was the impetus for me to become a Buddhist. It's like I want to experience this, and I don't want to take this drug each time to do it. And although that was a quick way into that visualization, I just wonder if Trungpa spoke about that at all, or you have any thoughts around that, of just having that perception of the world in that viewpoint.
Thank you, Kurt. First of all, I think it's entirely fitting that you were the first person to speak, because I feel like, this is the artist's way. This is the artist's vision. And Trungpa Rinpoche encouraged all of us to create one form of art or another. And it's this vision, this ability to cut through the fog of thought and see the world as it truly is, tender, beautiful, fresh, with heart, that is the true inspiration for art, whether it's physical art or words or poetry or whatever it may be. And he was a great artist. It came out of this inspiration. He not only painted and created and was a flower arranger, but he wrote poetry endlessly. He felt that just the way you hold a cup of tea can be art. I remember him saying that to us. Your every gesture, everything you do, your whole physical manifestation can be an expression of it. So, yeah, I feel like this vision that he's giving us here is all about that. And you as an artist, and the other people here who are artists like Meg and double Megs and everybody else. Yeah, I think it's speaking to us. Yeah. So you're asking about psychotropic drugs. I'll tell you what I feel about them. I feel that they're an artificial introduction to this. And of course, they don't last, right? They come down, and then you have to go about really doing it. Also, they contain within them when you take psychotropic drugs, LSD, mescaline, whatever it might have been, DMT, they also exaggerate your ego. There's a tremendous sense of self that can occur at the same time. So they can produce a lot of confusion. That's why so many people had bad trips, as they call them. Remember those? But at the same time, it is an opening to a different way of seeing the world. Now, I don't think Shambhala vision is going to be as an intense a visual experience as perhaps taking, a psychedelic drug. But I think those are an introduction, to that vision. It opened up a lot of people to it. And then Trungpa Rinpoche said, you have to put it away and go and do it really, open your mind. And we experience that, don't we? Whenever the fog clears and you see the freshness of the day, perhaps, whatever it might be, the moon at night, and it touches your heart, it opens your heart. We're encountering that same vividness, but in a more gentler, softer, actually probably more beautiful way than we might have done on LSD or mescaline or DMT. But they were so violent, and I think a lot of people, like those of us who did those drugs, were using them as escapes as well. Escapes from the anxiety of thought and our depressions. And that doesn't work. You've got to really accept yourself and be kind to yourself and begin to dissolve the self-attack rather than escape from it, because it comes back. We all came down, and we had to deal with that. But I do think it's a funny introduction, isn't it? I think it was more visual than anything else, the psychotropic experience, It didn't have so much have the quality of heart, those psychedelic drugs. At least not as I experienced them, and I did back in the day. Thanks for bringing that up, though.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, I thought it was so appropriate that you should be first to speak. I was thinking of you all the whole time I was reading this, you and Meg, and others who are artists. There's another way to tune into this vision. Trungpa Rinpoche described it in a seminar he gave on the bardos. And he talked about the fact that you can reach a height of neurosis, of neuroticism, where you're so crazy and your mind is going 1,000,000 miles a minute, and suddenly it freezes. And in that moment, you can see this world so vividly because the mind has frozen. But it's utterly neurotic and temporary, and you will descend into insanity again. And when I heard him describe that, I thought of Vincent van Gogh, Van Gogh, however we want to say it. and how he went, really mad, but had such an immense vision, into the world and communicated that vividness to us. You don't want to go that route, though, as Vincent van Gogh demonstrated.
I would like to add in one thing that I didn't hear too much, which was love. I think that's a wholesome mind state that you can get by meditating. And it shows you that there's more love in the world for other people and things. And that how beautiful the world is, like you said. Yeah.
Well said. Thank you, Russ. Terrific. Wonderful contribution. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Mark has his hand up for a while now.
Mark,
Hi.
hi,
I just, well, one thing Kurt was talking about, just thought you might be interested in a study they were doing, and I can't tell you where, I forget, but psilocybin, the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, generally, I think that's what psilocybin is, the drug. They were giving it to patients that were end-stage patients who were dying. And they went from being, oh, you know about this a little bit? And yeah, at any rate, they gave them this drug. It was like a one-hit deal under close supervision. And they went from being very anxious about dying and everything. And it was like the next day, it was like, oh, no problem. It was like they got it, whether it was being in the moment. And it sounds like a simple answer, but for them, it's something they're looking at medicinally for people who, are in a tragic state to help relieve their anxiety. And I'm going to leave that for a second. Is Shambhala Nirvana?
No.
No, absolutely not.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No. Shambhala is real. Nirvana is basically an end of suffering. But as long as you pursue it, you're engaged in a form of suffering there as well.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's go on to chapter 2. We've got, I think we have enough time. It's a short chapter and it's a very useful one.
Oh, John, be careful about brushing the microphone with the papers.
Thanks. Sorry. Okay. So this chapter 2 is called Discovering Basic Goodness. And the way we discover basic goodness, which we've just described, right? This wholesomeness of the world, this beauty, this vividness of the world when it's seen stripped of our anxious dreams, which are like a fog. When you're involved in these dreams, you're walking along in a fog, can't see through it properly. And so we discover basic goodness by beginning to cut through that fog of dream and seeing the world directly. And this is the way, what that is describing is the whole practice of meditation. This is what meditation really is. It's not about calming oneself and achieving some kind of state of peace, although that comes along with, that's part of it. But it's really about cutting through this fog. This is the fundamental purpose of meditation, and seeing the world as it truly is. So he starts out this chapter by saying that a great deal of chaos in the world occurs because people don't appreciate themselves. Having never developed sympathy or gentleness toward ourselves, towards oneself, one cannot experience harmony or peace within oneself. This is the whole idea that Ross brought up. If we begin to love ourselves, we can extend that out to others. But if we hate ourselves, we're going to extend that out to others. And therefore, what they project to others is also inharmonious and confused. So instead of appreciating our lives as confused beings, we often take our existence for granted, finding it depressing or burdensome. And people threaten to commit suicide because they aren't getting what they think they deserve out of life. We have to accept personal responsibility for uplifting our lives. That kind of gentleness toward and appreciation of yourself provides the ground for helping yourself and others. And it's really the expression in its beginning, middle, and end of love. He says we can uplift our state of existence and cheer up fully. Existence is wonderful and precious. How do we discover this kind of appreciation? The discipline for developing both gentleness toward ourselves and appreciation of our world is the sitting practice of meditation. And then after that, its extension into daily life, into meditation in action. And this has been part of the Shambhala tradition for the 2,600 years since the time of the Buddha, transmitted orally from one person to the next, a living tradition, ancient but still up to date. And it has to be transmitted from one person to the next verbally, orally, can't be done with books. It has to have the quality of human friendship and communication. Love. Meditation isn't cultural. It isn't tied to any one culture. It's a basic act. You sit on the ground, establishing your connection with earth. Take a good posture. You develop a sense of your spot, your place on earth, here. He says this is the means of rediscovering ourselves and our basic goodness, the means to tune ourselves into genuine reality without any preconceptions or expectations. It's not contemplating a subject like thinking about love or thinking about death or thinking about these things intellectually, conceptually, nor is it trance, absorption, one-pointed fixation on an object. This is unconditional meditation, awareness, right here. We all can do it right this second. Aware here of whatever is happening. He says, Shambhala meditation is simply training our mind of being so that our mind and body can be synchronized. Then we are without deception, fully genuine and alive. So when your mind and body are not synchronized, you might be doing one thing, picking up a glass, but you're thinking about another. They're out of sync. But if we are fully here, awake, aware right now of whatever is going on, this image before you on the computer screen, these words, the feeling of your body in your chair or your cushion, whatever you're sitting on, all of that aware, then mind and body are synchronized. And this is what it means, the Shambhala meditation, and we can be without deception. When we are doing one thing and thinking another, that's deception. And when we're without deception, when we're without our minds and body are synchronized, then we are fully here, fully alive, fully present. He says the practice of meditation allows us to experience all the textures of the roadway of life. And we begin to find in ourselves that there is no fundamental complaint about anyone or anything at all. Little complaints might arise and pass away, and then they're gone. And we are right here, synchronizing body and mind, present. He says you begin by sitting down cross-legged on the ground, if you can do it. As you get older, maybe you're going to sit in a chair. And you realize that you are capable of sitting like a king or queen on a throne. The regalness of that situation shows that you have the dignity that comes from being still and simple. Still and simple. contains tremendous dignity, awareness. It's noble. In the practice of meditation, an upright posture is extremely important, he says. Don't we emphasize this every day? Having an upright back is not artificial, but natural to the human body. Slouching is unusual, a sign of giving in to neurosis. So when you sit erect, you are proclaiming to yourself and to the rest of the world that you are going to be a warrior. Remember, brave, fearless, a fully human being. You assume your spot properly. Then he says, because your back is upright, you feel no trace of shyness or embarrassment, so you do not hold your head down. Your shoulders become straight automatically, so you develop a good sense of head and shoulders. That became a slogan. Good sense of head and shoulders, good head and shoulders. The knees don't have to touch the ground when you're sitting cross-legged, although they can. Depends on your posture. There's a Zen novice posture where your knees do hit the ground. And your hands are on your thighs, palms down, and you're assuming a sense of your spot properly. You don't gaze randomly around. You have a sense that you are there properly. So your eyes are open. Your gaze, well, when we're sitting in a group, not on computer, he recommended your gaze be slightly downward. Later, I've heard other teachers saying that you can put your gaze wherever you like, up to the right, straight ahead, and especially when we have computers, you may not want to be looking down at your keyboard or your screen. But a recommended way to do it is that you, when you're sitting perhaps alone or on the floor, you aim your eyes about 6 feet in front of you, down at about a 45-degree angle, more or less. He says this is a royal pose you can see in some Egyptian and South American sculptures, as well as in Oriental statues. And I think we have a picture of one of the Lohan statues in this chapter. Yes. Yeah, there it is. You see this a ceramic statue. Actually, what this is, in Tang Dynasty China, around in the 700s, these statues appeared. They were disciple statues. There were 12 of them, just statues of the Buddha's disciples, about 4 feet high. The remarkable thing about them was they weren't icons. They were portraits, each one of them different face, different body. They were portraits of individuals. And you can see 2 of them, those of you who live in New York, at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And they're now around the world, these Lohans. But they started a tradition of disciple halls. And in fact, what I use for my little picture here, hold on a second. These are modern day, relatively. They're from Bangkok, disciple statues, and you can see each one is different. They're a different person. They were given to me as a present by a friend of mine. So he talks about how these statues embody the dignity and the awakening of good posture. Although those guys were actually slumping, I think, the ones I just showed you. So he says in your daily life, you should also be aware of your posture, your head and shoulders, how you walk and how you look at people. Even when you're not meditating, you can maintain a dignified state of existence, and it helps you to wake up into the mind of meditation and daily life, this mind of open-eyed, open-minded appreciation for the way the world is arising now. Then in meditation practice, you pay attention to your breath. When you breathe, you are utterly there. You go out with the out-breath. Your breath dissolves, and then the in-breath happens naturally. Then you go out again. As you breathe out, you dissolve. Then your in-breath occurs naturally. You don't have to follow it in. Go out and dissolve. Chew. Then come back to your posture. Then chew and come back to your posture. This is what we're doing, isn't it? When there are thoughts, you say thinking. You can do this. This is optional. I've begun teaching it again. You say that mentally. It gives you some leverage to come back to your breath because you say thinking, it's just like identifying the thought, and then boom, you're back to your breath or back to awareness, whatever it may be. Especially works when the thoughts have taken you away completely. It doesn't matter what the thoughts are saying. That's inconsequential. All of them are regarded purely as thinking. You can be having a terribly profound thought about being the Buddha or about meditation. You can be having an utterly trivial or inconsequential thought. You can be having a sexual fantasy. It doesn't matter. They're all just thinking. Then you go back to the breath. If you remember the importance of your posture, that will allow you to synchronize your mind and body. If you don't have good posture, your practice will be like a lame horse trying to pull a cart. It will never work. So when you have good posture, you have a better chance of synchronizing mind and body, coming present, right here. You're working with your mind and your body, and when the two work together, you don't leave reality. The ideal state of tranquility, he says, comes from experiencing body and mind being synchronized. It's this, right here. It's not some trance state. This is the ideal of tranquility. If your body slumps, then your mind will be somewhere else. When your mind and body are synchronized, then because of your good posture, your breathing happens naturally, and because your breathing and your posture work together, your mind is a reference point to check back to. Therefore, your mind will go out naturally with the breath. He says this method of synchronizing mind and body is training you to be very simple and to feel that you are not special, but ordinary, extraordinary. You sit simply as a warrior, and out of that, a sense of individual dignity arises. You are there, fully, personally, genuinely. So the meditation practice in the Shambhala tradition is designed to educate people, to be honest. When we are synchronized, mind and body, it's the ultimate honesty. And genuine, true to oneself. That's what this means, to synchronize mind and body. We don't have hidden agendas. You can tell when you're talking to someone and you're saying whatever you're saying, but you can see that their mind is thinking something else. They're thinking something, or they're saying something to you. Maybe they're telling you how much they like you. And what you can see behind that is that there's really something else going on. There is a lack of synchronization in this instance I'm describing of body and mind. And the person is not being honest or genuine, not true to themselves. They've got a hidden agenda. And that's what we're giving up, is hidden agendas of all kinds. We're coming into this utter simplicity. And then finally, he concludes this chapter. He says, in some sense, we should regard ourselves as being burdened. We have the burden of helping this world. If we take our burden as a delight, we can actually liberate the world. The way to begin is with ourselves. From being open and honest with ourselves, which is another way of saying synchronizing body and mind, we can also learn to be open with others. We can work with the rest of the world on the basis of the goodness we discover in ourselves. Therefore, meditation practice is regarded as a good and, in fact, excellent way to overcome warfare in the world, our own warfare, as well as greater warfare. That's the end of that second chapter. I think that that's a description of meditation and how it works and why we do it that we can treasure and refer back to. Who's going to be a Pawo, a warrior, and step forward? Dawn is. Good.
I just had a comment that what I'm getting from these readings is that one way to look at it is it's describing the opposite of cynicism. That's how I would describe it. It's cynicism can breed defensiveness, aggression, strategies to protect oneself and push people out, all the rest.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. It can be very self-serving, can't it? Become an occupation. Sometimes it can be delightful, though, don't you think? There are some wonderful cynics.
Yeah, well, I can get caught up in watching, different YouTube news shows and political commentaries, and then I'm just taken away. But I can always tell afterwards, like, do I feel like crap afterwards? Or do I feel like kind of uplifted and present? That's sort of like a good gauge. But, I notice I don't even need, to watch a YouTube thing or read the news. I mean, I can do it to myself really easily.
I'm thinking of some delightful cynics, like Oscar Wilde, He's walking down the street with James Whistler, his good friend, and he says something clever, and Whistler says, "Oh, Oscar, I wish I'd said that." And Wilde says, "Don't worry, Jamie, you will." Went on and on like that with Oscar Wilde. What a delightful cynic he was. But you're right, it could be very self-serving, I think. Yeah. Rinpoche said that cynics make the best Buddhists initially. But ultimately, cynicism is a knife that cuts itself, he said. You have to give that up too. That's a quote.
I think Randy has his hand up there.
Oh, great.
AKA Kimberly.
Hi.
Hi, Randy. Hi, Kimberly.
Teachings, John. So another word for synchronicity of mind and body, I thought is yoga. And I'm wondering what influence Buddhism had on, say, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali.
Well, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, are in the Hindu tradition. There is yoga in the Buddhist tradition. It's an advanced practice. It takes place in the Vajrayana. And there are the 4 yogas of Naropa that are practiced as part of the Mahamudra teachings. And they get quite involved. Generally, someone like me, I can't do those yogas. They're for younger people. They involve a lot of physical strenuousness. And at my age, I'm not going to be doing that. But there are yogas that we can come to. Probably the most famous of the yogas, the 6 yogas of Naropa, is the yoga of inner heat, by which you work with the energy in the body and you develop this inner heat. It's called dumo. But yeah, that'll come. It's very different in the Hindu tradition. But let's put it this way. You can use anything, and especially something like yoga, as a path of meditation. You can synchronize your mind and body as you do the yoga postures. And then it becomes a path to enlightenment, and not just a physical exercise for having a looser body, more fit body. Definitely.
Yes.
Great opportunity to practice synchronization of mind and body, just like when you're on a meditation cushion. But there are these definitely Buddhist yogas. They just tend to be more advanced practices in the Buddhist context.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's great. You know, Buddhism absorbed and sort of reused so much of Hinduism. The practices, the gods, definitely.
Kripalu yoga has something that they call meditation in motion, which is a joining of the mind and body. That's part of Kripalu yoga.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, meditation and yoga go together.
Mhm.
They should.
Mhm.
And also Tai Chi,
Tai Chi, absolutely.
very much meditation and motion.
Mhm.
Definitely. The martial arts in their pure form, when they're not, when they don't devolve into mere aggression, are definitely meditative exercises.
Well, and isn't that the same with flower arranging or even cooking? Couldn't it be that?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. There's so many Japanese arts that were combined with meditation, especially, Trungpa Rinpoche was a master of Ikebana. He actually studied it when he was in England and received this title, Master of Ikebana. And he did flower arrangements all his life. In fact, where is that photograph? I have a photograph of him doing one. Sorry, forgotten where it is. It must be downstairs. Yeah, definitely. There's so many art forms.
Well, in that vein, calligraphy too, all his calligraphy, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as he said, lifting a cup of tea can be an expression of art in life, of meditation. Whatever we do.
Can you meditate at any point in time, doing anything really?
Absolutely.
That's
In
right.
fact, that's what we're aiming for, is to bring it into our lives all the time. It's called meditation in action. And you can come into this state of mind, clear, open, awake, aware, when you're driving your car, when you're talking to a friend. You just come back out of dream. Definitely. Thank you for saying that, Ross.
Miriam,
Hi, thank you for all of the inspiration. And I just wanted to go back to the treasure at the beginning of the book, where we have the translation of this poem, and I'm not sure exactly what the term is for this, that Rinpoche discovered. Or
Terma. Yeah, terma.
Karma, okay. but reading it, I was really struck by it. It reminded me of the story of creation in Genesis, and a lot of themes in there, like Adam and Eve, you know, when human society became manifest, and at that time liberation and confusion arose, you know, when Adam ate the apple, and you know, he talks also about good and evil in certain ways, and then like confidence, which is primordially free, that's, you know, inner goodness, it's utter goodness. And later, some of the stories in Genesis, I mean, he doesn't talk about a flood per se, but he talks about these places. And I don't know, there seems to be some structure to this, which has a universal theme, maybe. I don't know. I'm just mentioning it because it really struck me as a deeper aspect of it.
I think you're right. I'm not enough of an expert on world myth to be able to draw, you know, a lot of parallels. But, you know, this starts out, this text, it was a terma, a revealed text that came down over the ages to Rinpoche like a radio transmission. Most terma come from Padmasambhava, the person who took Buddhism to Tibet in the 8th century AD. But there are other terma as well. I'm not sure where who was the originator of this one, but he says from the great cosmic mirror, that's what we're in the middle of. All of this constant arising of phenomena and passing away in the instant. It's like a mirror. When you look in the mirror, there are constant images arising and changing, right? Passing. Nothing stays the same. It's just a constant display of images in the mirror. And this is the cosmic mirror, without beginning and without end. I mean, it's wild. Human society became manifest. That's us. At that time, liberation and confusion arose. This is what we've all experienced, liberation and confusion, these two options. When fear and doubt occurred, toward the confidence which is primordially free. Confidence. Remember, he said self-doubt, which is the lack of confidence, is the Buddhist version of original sin. This confidence is the confidence that's here in the air. It's in our awareness. It's here all the time. We come back to it. It's primordially free because no one owns it. No one possesses it. You just live in it. And he says, when human society became manifest and eliminated, when fear and doubt occurred toward the confidence which is primordially free, countless multitudes of cowards arose. Those are the thoughts, those fearful thoughts. Oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, I'm gonna die. Oh, I'm gonna be unhappy. You know, all that stuff. When the confidence which is primordially free, that's the synchronization of body and mind, another way of putting it, was followed and delighted in, countless multitudes of warriors arose. Now remember, warriors aren't aggressive. These are brave, fearless people. So they have perfect confidence. They're just here, awake. It goes on like that. You know, we could go through it line by line. It's really, and when those countless multitudes of cowards hid themselves in caves and jungles, they killed each other's, they killed their brothers and sisters and ate their flesh. They followed the example of beasts. I mean, we can see this in the world. They provoked terror in each other. Thus they took their own lives, committed suicide too, kindled great fire of hatred, roiled the river of lust, wallowed in the mud of laziness. In the age of famine and plague arose. All from falling away from this simple awareness in the present moment that is so full of confidence and appreciation of life, into the anxiety, the fear of dreams, and the self-hatred of dreams. And then of those who were dedicated to the primordial confidence, the many hosts of warriors, of fearless people, people who dwelled in this synchronization of body and mind, if you want. Some went to highland mountains and erected beautiful castles of crystal. Some went to the lands of beautiful lakes and islands. This is Shambhala, you see, and erected lovely palaces. Some went to the pleasant plains and sowed fields of barley, rice, and wheat. They were always without quarrel, ever loving and very generous, without encouragement, through their self-existing inscrutability. Now there's a phrase. He emphasizes that in other places. They were always devoted to the imperial Rigden. The imperial Rigden is the symbol of this enlightened mind. And their self-existing inscrutability, you see, when somebody is speaking to you and they have a hidden agenda, sometimes you can read it in their face. You know what they're thinking. But when they're just right here, there's nothing to read. They're just utterly inscrutable. That's what he's talking about, this self-existing inscrutability, utter presence in the present moment. Awake. It's terrific. The rest of the text goes on. We have to get to the point where we can distribute these terma.
Thank you.
And by the way, on Thursday night, we're doing a terma, the sadhana of Mahamudra. That's a terma that's open to people. We're going to be chanting it together and be a little bit of a talk about it after meditation. I was told to give it a promote. It's another terma that he received, Trungpa Rinpoche, when he was on retreat at the invitation of the Queen of Bhutan at a place where Padmasambhava meditated in the 8th century before he went to Tibet, this extraordinary cave called Tagdsang. It's a cave, there are a series of caves at the top of a 2,000-foot cliff. We'll see pictures of it. So
We're almost out of time. Does anyone else have a question or comment you want to get in?
and then we've got tomorrow too after meditation for discussion.
I'm curious, what's the that marking? It looks kind of like a trident or something. You know what that stands for or what that symbol means?
It's the symbol of the Rigden kings.
Oh,
Yeah. It's funny, they left out the terma symbol. But anyhow. Anybody else? Before we wind up with the closing chants. Okay. I'll put the chants on screen. Any last chants? Okay. Meg, you're going to lead us, I think?
Yes.
Great.
Mute.
I'll mute all. Meg, unmute yourself.
Okay.
Actually, for some reason, it's not letting me mute everybody. Barry, can you mute everyone?
That worked, I think.
Okay.
I just did it. Yeah.
We'll close with a prayer for peace, and then we'll dedicate the merit earned by our practice for the benefit of all sentient beings. By the blessings of enlightened and compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times and my prayers of pure aspiration, may wars, conflicts, epidemics, and all other maladies dissolve in this world, and may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing. from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thanks so much, John.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Megan. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Take care.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you, John.